Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God. Back with you with the next video in my series, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Great Expectations. Mr. Jaggers nodded his head retrospectively 2 or 3 times and actually drew a sigh. "Pip," said he, "we won't talk about poor dreams. You know more about such things than I, having much fresher experience of that kind. But now, about this other matter, I'll put a case to you. Mind, I admit nothing." He waited for me to declare that I quite understood that he expressly said that he admitted nothing. "Now, Pip," said Mr. Jaggers, "put this case. Put the case that a woman, under such circumstances as you have mentioned, held her child concealed, and was obliged to communicate the fact to her legal adviser, on his representing to her that he must know, with an eye to the latitude of his defence, how the facts stood about that child. Put the case that at the same time he held a trust to find a child for an eccentric rich lady to adopt and bring up. I follow you, sir. Put the case that he lived in an atmosphere of evil, and that all he saw of children was their being generated in great numbers for certain destruction. Put the case that he often saw children solemnly tried at a criminal bar, where they were held up to be seen. Put the case that he habitually knew of their being imprisoned, whipped, transported, neglected, cast out, qualified in all ways for the hangman, and growing up to be hanged. Put the case that pretty nigh all the children he saw in his daily business life he had reason to look upon as so much spawn, to develop into fish that were come to his net, to be prosecuted, defended, forsworn, made orphans, bedeviled somehow. I follow you, sir. Put the case, Pip, that here was one pretty little child out of the heap, who could be saved, whom the father believed dead, and dared make no stir about, as to whom, over the mother, the legal adviser had this power. I know what you did and how you did it. You came so and so. This was your manner of attack, and this manner of resistance. You went so and so. You did such and such things to divert suspicion. I have tracked you through it all, and I tell you all. Part with the child, unless it should be necessary to produce it clear to you, and then it shall be produced. Give the child into my hands, and I will do my best to bring you off. If you are saved, your child is saved too. If you are lost, your child is still saved. Put the case that this was done, and that the woman was cleared. I understand you perfectly, but that I make no admissions." "That you make no admissions," and Wemmick repeated, "no admissions." Put the case, Pip, that passion and terror of death had a little shaken the woman's intellect, and that when she was set at liberty, she was scared out of the ways of the world and went to him to be sheltered. Put the case that he took her in, and that he kept down the old, violent nature, whenever he saw an inkling of its breaking out, by asserting his power over her in the old way. Do you comprehend the imaginary case? Quite. Put the case that the child grew up, and was married for money, that the mother was still living, that the father was still living, that the mother and father, unknown to one another, were dwelling within so many miles, furlongs, yards, if you like, of one another, that the secret was still a secret, except that you had got wind of it. Put the case to yourself very carefully. I do. I ask Wemmick to put it to himself very carefully. And Wemmick said, I do. For whose sake would you reveal the secret? For the father's? I think he would not be much better than for the mother's. For the mother's? I think if she had done such a deed, she would be safer where she was. For the daughter's? I think it would hardly serve her to establish her parentage for the information of her husband, and to drag her back to disgrace after an escape of 20 years, pretty secure to last for life. But add the case that you had loved her, Pip, and had made her the subject of those poor dreams, which have, at one time or another, been in the heads of more men than you think likely. Then I tell you that you had better, and would much sooner, when you had thought well of it, chop off that bandaged left hand of yours with your bandaged right hand, and then pass the chopper on to Wemmick there, to cut that off too. I looked at Wemmick, whose face was very grave. He gravely touched his lips with his forefinger. I did the same. Mr. Jaggers did the same. Now, Wemmick, said the latter then, resuming his usual manner, what item was it you were at when Mr. Pip came in? Standing by for a little, while they were at work, I observed that the odd looks they had cast at one another were repeated several times. With this difference now, that each of them seemed suspicious, not to say conscious, of having shown himself in a weak and unprofessional light to the other. For this reason, I suppose they were now inflexible with one another, Mr. Jaggers being highly dictatorial, and Wemmick obstinately justifying himself whenever there was the smallest point in abeyance for a moment. I had never seen them on such ill terms, for generally they got on very well indeed together. But they were both happily relieved by the opportune appearance of Mike, the client with the fur cap and the habit of wiping his nose on his sleeve, whom I had seen on the very first day of my appearance within those walls. This individual, who, either in his own person or in that of some member of his family, seemed to always be in trouble, which is that place meant Newgate, called to announce that his eldest daughter was taken up on suspicion of shoplifting. As he imparted this melancholy circumstance to Wemmick, Mr. Jaggers standing magisterially before the fire, and taking no share in the proceedings, Mike's eye happened to twinkle with a tear. "What are you about?" demanded Wemmick, with the uttermost indignation. "What do you come snivelling here for?" "I didn't go to do it, Mr. Wemmick." "You did," said Wemmick. "How dare you? You're not in a fit state to come here. If you can't come here without spluttering like a bad pen, what do you mean by it?" "A man can't help his feelings, Mr. Wemmick," pleaded Mike. "His what?" demanded Wemmick, quite savagely. "Say that again." "Now look here, my man," said Mr. Jaggers, advancing a step, and pointing to the door. "Get out of his office. Get out of this office. I'll have no feelings here. Get out." "It serves you right," said Wemmick. "Get out." So the unfortunate Mike very humbly withdrew, and Mr. Jaggers and Wemmick appeared to have re-established their good understanding, and went to work again with an air of refreshment about them as if they had just had lunch. Chapter 52. From Little Britain, I went with my cheque in my pocket to Miss Skiffin's brother, the accountant, and Miss Skiffin's brother, that accountant, going straight to Clarriker's and bringing Clarriker to me. I had the great satisfaction of concluding that arrangement. It was the only good thing I had done, and the only completed thing I had done, since I was first apprised of my great expectations. Clarriker informing me on that occasion that the affairs of the house were steadily progressing, that he would now be able to establish a small branch house in the East which was much wanted for the extension of the business, and that Herbert, in his new partnership capacity, would go out and take charge of it. I found that I must have prepared for a separation from my friend, even though my own affairs had been more settled. And now indeed I felt as if my last anchor were loosening its hold, and I should be driving with the winds and waves. We'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again.